Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hollywood stories. Those of you who have worked in the entertainment industry, tell us your X-tier stories.
I worked with a famous actress in a short film I did when I was 18. In one part where there's a close-up, you can clearly see her eyes shift into a reptilian form. I started getting followed after I showed this to a friend. Then later the file got corrupted and the 35mm print I had in the lab was damaged by accident. This made me quit films. Fuck you, Maria de la Fuente.
This isn't earth-shattering or anything, but I was once friends with a D-tier actor. He co-starred in a lesser-known film with Rupert Grint and Alan Rickman. No, it wasn't Harry Potter. Here are some odd quirks about him. Charismatic and old school at social gatherings. Would hold the door for women and take off his hat when speaking to them, etc. Speaking of hats, he would wear a fucking top hat and Victorian-esque cape to formal events, nicer parties and funerals, but somehow pulled it off without seeming autistic. Stole Pokemon cards for some reason I still don't understand. Would flip into a wicked temper over the dumbest shit. One time he threw a tantrum over a mutual friend not getting on Xbox Live when they were supposed to. Very secretive about his personal life even though we both grew up in the same little shithole in Kentucky. Obviously had some sort of drug problem. My guess is coke. I haven't talked to him in years, but I hope he's doing alright. I think you have to be eccentric and damaged to work in that industry.
I grew up in a very old historic town in New England. Several B-tier and A-tier movie stars, execs and generally filthy rich people lived at the town square where there are 6,000 to 20,000 square foot mansions. I lived 2 miles down the road in a middle-class area. Decent houses, lots of land. It was rare, but you would occasionally see one of the celebrities in public. They often looked terrible. It was an unwritten rule to just leave them alone. Here's where the story gets interesting. A buddy of mine was a valet at the private country club they often congregated at. He said he found all sorts of occult shit in their vehicles. Not all, but some of them. Other times, they had late-night parties at the country club. Another friend in college was a bartender at that country club. He told me that he was blocked from the schedule on nights where they had the late-night parties. They hired their own staff and guarded the premises. There were all sorts of rumors, including spirit cooking, ritualistic sacrifice, etc. It wouldn't surprise me, honestly. That was almost 20 years ago now, so those celebrities are probably close to dead or long retired anyway.
I'm in animation, so probably not close enough to the top. Met a few celeb actors and got very normal vibes from all of them. Currently work directly for one of the all-time biggest names in animation who got me too'd a couple years back. He's a really cool guy, so I get the feeling there was something else going on there. I've met plenty of directors for top Disney movies and they're all pretty simple people. Being a Disney animated film director doesn't really pay all that much despite how much money that shit rakes in. Most of them live in really humble houses and drive, like, a BMW maybe. Anyway, I've been to Club 33 and all that. The weirdest thing I ever heard was when I was working for Disney TV Animation. One of the facility's managers was talking with my producer in the kitchen. Disney Toon Studios had shut down and they were clearing out the building, which is some ways away from the building I worked in, but in the same area as Disney Imagineering, Disney Publishing, etc. over in Glendale. Anyway, she said there were some guys being really assertive with her and the other facilities people to clear and make sure everyone was out of the building by 8 p.m. This was before it had closed all the way, so there would still be people working there for the next month or so. She said the building needed to be completely empty of people, including her and the other facilities. Security people, so they could take something out of the building. She said they didn't seem to want her to ask any questions. This kind of weirded everyone out. We joked that it was Walt's frozen head, but who knows? I'm not sure what the history of that building is either.
Not really a Hollywood or mainstream film X experience, but here we go. I worked for an independent horror company from 2006 to 2011. A few of my friends were the ones who started working for them in 2005, and they were the ones who introduced me to them. I was just an edgy 19-year-old who was into death metal and horror, and I needed a job badly, so I accepted the job offer. Nothing bad happened in the interview, but there was a strange aura that the owner in the room gave off. Like warped vibes seeping through tiny cracks in the walls. The first few months weren't so bad either, just him introducing me around to individuals both with the company and those with other studios who had connections to him. My job was to ship off films ordered from their websites in the supply room located in the basement of his house, with most doors, including the one heading upstairs, locked. This did not worry me given how naive I was at the time. I would be paid under the table for most of my career there, with cash in envelopes delivered unmarked on my doorstep every last Friday of the month. We would have occasional events every once in a while, such as watching various films, including those on their very short early catalog, or being dragged to some small convention selling the overpriced films. Around about a year in, I realized that this man must be a common but still pressed on as I got special employee discounts and the occasional free gift. My two friends grew increasingly weirder as time went on, as one went completely missing for 3 months in 2007 and the other friend nearly killed his mother and then himself in late 2009. This is where things got even more dark. The missing friend hardly talked after this incident and lived in seclusion for the rest of his life. The owner and some of his closer workers became incredibly distant after both events occurred and would stare at me while I worked. I became the only one working on shipments until more arrived 2 months later. About 3 months into 2011, the owner invited me to go camping with him on Halloween, and I went. He drove to my house at 2 a.m. on the 31st and knocked on my door loudly. I hopped up with a bat till I saw him and quickly put on clothes and hopped in his car, still suspicious of what he was doing. As soon as we arrived, I saw 3 men in masks that would be repurposed in a later film by them, and a fireplace alongside a camcorder on a tripod. This never struck me as odd because Halloween, and I figured this was a film they were doing and they needed my help. As soon as I got out, I was knocked out cold. I woke up in the same forest with slightly stained and ripped clothes, with everything else taken from my body, including my keys and wallet. 3 hours before I would reach anyone. The lucky man who drove me to my house. A final letter sitting on my porch with $100 and a letter telling me I was no longer needed. Around 2012, his company would see a small upsurge in popularity, especially edgy horror YouTube channels. I still wonder what they are up to and what they did to my two friends. Needless to say, I left after 2 weeks of getting my shit together. I eventually got my shit back in a box along with another $100 with a t-shirt with their logo. I still felt their presence there and occasionally here, and I still have some of their early films that are quite rare and out of print now.
Not really Hollywood related, but I don't care. Be me. Film school friend. One of the professors is this really disgusting, somewhat fat and smelly guy. I immediately dislike him. But everyone else seemed to be okay with him because he's smart. My disdain grows in time. I can't put my finger on it, but something's off about him. At the end of the semester, we have to take our written exam. He comes back with the results and says he lost my paper. Fuck no, EXE. Tells me I wasn't at the exam. Had the whole class backing me up and telling him I was. Eventually he concedes and tells me in private to come at his house on Saturday to find the paper together. Nope.jpg. Go to the dean. The dean is this absolute Chad who is also the only person who gets the same vibes from that guy. It seems that he also hates him and starts going on a rant about him. The dean tells me he'll take care of it. Starts a shit show with him. Tells me that they agreed I should take the exam again with another professor. Tell him I will not do that and the dumbass professor needs to find my paper or give me top marks. Somehow he appreciates my balls and arranges that. The fat fuck smelly professor gets a grudge on me and looks at me odd after this incident. 1 year later I found out he was a killer and got arrested. Apparently he killed his girlfriend in '98 but got away with it cause his dad and mom were some big shots back then and pulled some strings. The case they had on him was also very flimsy but they kept an eye on him. Both of his parents also died recently and they could pull the same strings for him. The police broke into his apartment and found some kind of creepy altar to his dead girlfriend. That asshole asked me to come to his house and he probably would have killed me too.
I had a family friend that was this evangelical Christian kid. He posted some videos on YouTube of playing his acoustic guitar and singing. And he was really good. These producers got in contact with him and promised they'd make him the next Justin Bieber. They flew him out from the East Coast to this nice hotel on Venice Beach. He'd get up at like 6 a.m. to practice and write since this was something he was taking very seriously. These producers and label heads would stroll in around noon with a bunch of drugs like Adderall, weed, cocaine, and try to pressure him into doing some while he wrote his songs. He'd decline and they would just go ahead and just start snorting blow in front of him. After a while of refusing their pressure, he got sick of it. A really sheltered, wholesome Christian kid, and decided to just fly back home and forget about it. This was around 2008 to 2010 when that genre of pop was still popular.
Wonder how many drugs they've given to Justin.
Probably had him smoking weed and ripping Addis since he was in short pants. From what I hear, they do that, test the limits, see how weird they can get before they let you in their inner circle. I heard some rumor that they showed Bernie Mac his clone, and when it freaked him out, they had him whacked. It's the perfect racket for ugly rich guys that want kids from bad homes.
I feel like with Hollywood, any entertainment biz is much like any other big money empire. The most corrupt and shitty are usually at the top, 'cause we're in a system that rewards that kind of shit. There's probably more of a chance to be at the top without being any shadier than your average person.
It's definitely shadier than most industries by virtue of the way it is naturally constructed. It is an attractive industry to young and naive people, and the only qualifications one needs to succeed in acting specifically are either talent, attractiveness, or both. People can use transactional sex in all industries, but in most other lines of work there are other barriers in place that makes it less prevalent. You can't fuck your way into a successful medical practice without also having a medical degree, but in show business you can go from broke promiscuous waitress to being in some movie literally overnight in some circumstances. What's more is that wannabes in show business are desperate and willing to do just about anything to get ahead. And because it's quite literally all about connections over merit in most cases, all it takes is an unscrupulous gatekeeper like Harvey Weinstein and you got yourself a recipe for disaster. It's even worse with kids. Stage parents are fucking awful. You get folks like Dina Lohan and Kid Culkin who are psychotic and looking to live out their own dreams through their kids, and they'll push them to do anything. It's disgusting. It's getting better. There are more and more mechanisms being put in place to protect the more vulnerable people in the industry, but that shit moves slow, and you're always going to have evil people willing to game the system. It's honestly a shit industry that isn't worth aspiring toward. Anytime someone asks me if they should get into it, I say no. I've known successful people in this business and unsuccessful people. Across the board, they're unhappy more often than they're happy.
Never set foot in Hollywood, but a very short version of my story goes as follows. Hit into drugs, specifically psychedelics. Searching for ego, death, and spirituality. Also enjoying some experimentation with a variety of drugs besides the hard stuff. Things are fine. Heavily into conspiracy theories. Have an earth-shattering trip in which I was fully conscious but felt aware I was being Truman showed, and going into a direction that would cause my destruction. Struggle to integrate. Get put through an occult ritual where I was told I was going to have money, fame, and sex, but I just had to give up my soul. Couldn't go through with it. Hugh gang stalking. Go crazy and eventually become a hermit. Come back into the real world eventually to a relatively normal life by the grace of God. This was before I had even started a legitimate band with any sort of name, guys. I was just a local guy who could play guitar and make music on the computer. No idea why Satan wanted me so bad, other than I think that talent in the industry is in short supply these days. That or he goes to people extremely early, or some people were watching my musical talents develop and let them know I'd be a good fit. The whole recruitment process is so insane it's actually still not making full sense to me even today. I sometimes think they were just buttering me up to get me in, but I really do have a knack for music. Fucking crazy shit and all true, God is my witness.
Could you explain this more? Did they kidnap you or something?
My theory is they can't do that. They abide by some sort of law that they really can't break, so they can't force anyone to do anything. It has to be by free will. I technically asked to join the Freemasons because I thought that was my life path. But they were doing a lot of leading me that way. They can't threaten you to do stuff, only make you feel threatened to do stuff, if that makes sense. It's all about your interpretation of events. Look up the Oath of the Abyss. That's what they're all about. I learned that without even knowing what it was for years. I intrinsically knew that philosophy and thought that's what was going on. It's not, but they try their hardest to make you feel that way. They try to get you as deep into solipsism as possible so you follow them. That's the only way what they do works. The initiation was one of my friends coaching me through allowing a demon to possess my body. Would be the short version. Someone I knew since childhood. I can't tell if he was a new initiate or had been in a generational satanic family. That was just setting the stage, I think. They would have taken it further, but after I started piecing shit together and figured out what he meant by the price of my deal, I cut off contact with everyone.
worked in the professional theater scene. I was a tech person, so I didn't have a ton of crazy interactions, but I always found it odd that when we worked with child actors, they all had the same agent. And it was known that this agent basically controlled the careers of all these kids in the area. Like, if you were a parent who wanted a Broadway famous kid, you had to use this agent or else your kid was not going anywhere. Freaked me out. Wonder WTF went on. Fun story. I was told by someone in the industry that my name would be blacklisted from future contract jobs. Why? I wasn't a leftist. I'm not far right or anything, just a skeptic. And questioning things get people pissed, especially leftists in power. I laughed and replied that I would blacklist the whole industry. I left in 2018 and joked with them. The professional theater industry is closed down. Actors and tech people are bleeding out, and I happily moved on doing my own thing, being my own boss.
What market were you in? Stage kids are niche, but I've not heard of a monopoly on them. Usually at most mid to upper tier agencies, the kids department will be handled by one rep. Could also be that the house you worked with had a relationship with a specific rep. As far as Broadway career launchers, I guess there are a few. I think I might know who you're talking about. That's a bit strange. I've known a couple open QS in tech who work pretty frequently. In fairness, these people already had a name. Although I'm not entirely surprised someone tried dicking you over. They probably did not actually have the authority they were hoping to project, but I'm glad you got out if you're happier elsewhere.
All I will say, it was Broadway but not New York. There's people with some power who run tech contract groups. A lot of theaters go through these people for getting contract workers before publicity posting for a job opening. My name was going to be blacklisted from these groups. Pissed off an old crone in the industry when I asked if she'd be okay with rioting in her neighborhood. This was some years ago, and surprise, surprise, this past summer there was. I laugh about it all now that I think of it. There was an incident where I think someone put a hit on a writer after their show lost a ton of money and the production company went belly up. I don't have any evidence to back it up, but the way it happened was all too strange. Not saying any more about that.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.